Video game rankings are something I haven't done too often on this channel, and it's something I'd like to do more of, to be honest. This video marks only the third time I've made a video ranking video games. The other times was BioShock and Uncharted, and in that time since that first Uncharted video game ranking was released, there have been exactly 0 games come out to warrant me updating this list. However, since that was only about my 7th video I made on this channel around April 2020, I feel like now that my quality of videos in terms of editing and, well, just straight up communicating has developed, that I want to redo it. Something I haven't done in this channel before is redo a video without there being a movie or season of a TV show to warrant me talking about it once more, but nonetheless we're going to do that today as it is my favorite video game franchise, and now that there is this Uncharted movie which I have seen today as of filming, so after I've ranked these games at the end I might talk about it a little bit just so you know my thoughts. So without further ado, let's get into this ranking. When talking about the Uncharted franchise, the one game which is forgotten is Lost Legacy, and it's not because it's bad, it's because it was initially intended to be a DLC for A Thief's End, which we'll talk about later on. They decided to release it a year later as its own separate game, charging full price, which is a bit of a harsh thing to do. The reason it is this low is for many reasons, and that, once again, that's not me saying it's bad, but not having the main characters of this series really dampened the quality of this game, as Chloe and Nadine are great together. They do have some good chemistry, but they don't match the presence nor have the same chemistry of Nate and Sully. And besides these two leads, the story itself, it's fine, but compared to the ambitious plots of the other games, they are leagues apart, and not to mention this one can be quite predictable at points and maybe even repetitive, as it is essentially an extension of Uncharted 4. This game has amazing graphics like that one does. Like Spider-Man Miles Morales, this game was very short and it wasn't a DLC, so it's kind of hard to put this above a game which has over 15 hours of gameplay. It feels bad to put Drake's Fortune down this low, but to be honest, it is the natural path for it, as it is a fantastic game, but due to time passing and what this franchise has gone on to do, it has to be in this position because it is quite a straightforward game, yet it is executed so well. The main advice I have for something attempting to build a franchise, whether that is a franchise in itself or a cinematic universe, is to stay contained, focused, and do something simple but try to execute it well. Prime example is Iron Man in the MCU. It wasn't chucking around all these setups for future films or for other characters to come in. Obviously that's a bit different in this case, but it had a simple story which it executed well, and later installments did build upon it. This is where we're introduced to Nate, Sully, Elena, these 3 great characters who all have great chemistry and are so much fun on screen, whether that's in the cutscenes or during battle. You may look at the graphics nowadays and be like, oh, they're not great, but keeping in mind this is 2007, these were the top graphics you'll get at that time, and not to mention how cinematic this game was, led to perhaps the most cinematic franchise in video game history. Can't really explain why, but I always feel like Uncharted 3 is not the odd one out, but one of the most unique, because we're dealing with a lot of changes in scenery, and in the previous games and even the games after this, a lot of the experience has been in the jungle, the forest, in caves. Taking it into like a vast desert, open landscape, it just felt very different, and that isn't a criticism at all, it's just a different perspective, because this game does have a lot of great things about it. Like with all these games, the story, I don't feel like I need to constantly praise it in each installment because all of them are fantastic, but this has what I think has to be the best action sequence in the entire franchise. You already know what it is, the plane sequence, so good that they pretty much replicated it into this new movie that just came out. Not only that, but it also does provide a look into Nate and Sully's past and how they meet, and it's not out of the blue at all. It also ties into the villain and her relationship with Sully, so that was a very beneficial thing to do from the start of this game. I don't feel like this ending was as strong as all the other games. It felt like it was still leading up to something bigger, which didn't end up coming. However, it wasn't disappointing by any means. It was still very fun and challenging. But one thing I was disappointed was, after introducing Charlie, who was a very positive thing from the start, It was a shame that him and Chloe were sidelined for pretty much the majority of the game, but nonetheless, still a fantastic addition into the franchise. And you know what quality we're dealing with if something with this rating only just makes it into the top 3. So this is one of my 2 controversial picks, well, this and first place, but looking at other people's rankings and pretty much everyone, to be honest, that I've talked to except for my brother, A Thief's End is at first place, this of course being Uncharted 4, and by me having it in second place is not saying it's bad on any terms. It is a truly fantastic game and the perfect close to Nate and Sully's story, and even Elena for that matter. It's such a satisfying conclusion, closes the book in a natural way where you see them at a much older age than before. Positive I mentioned for Uncharted 3 was that backstory for Sully and Nate, but here we are given an even more of an in-depth look into Nate's backstory, this time with the context of Sam, his brother, who adds an interesting dynamic into Uncharted 4, both in the ways of a thief and a brother to Nate. I haven't talked about it too much in this video, but for the record, the gameplay in each game is some of the best out there, and a new introduction to the franchise in this last installment, except for Lost Legacy, is the grappling hook, which makes for some new, unique ways of doing things which you haven't in the previous ones. This is a truly phenomenal game. So unfortunate to miss out on Top Spot, but Top Spot is there for a reason. Among Thieves is my favourite video game of all time, not just in this series. I grew up with this game and revisiting it was just as exciting and provoked so much nostalgia. I mentioned about Drake's Fortune executing a simple story, and Uncharted 2 was allowed to build upon this massively, and that's what it does, with the stakes becoming bigger, the scenery and locations for the plot to be so much more vast. And despite his lack of dialogue, Lazarevich makes for the most menacing villain in any of these games. Such an intimidating guy with this huge presence, and when you have to fight him in the final battle, he's twice as bad. You really notice it here, how cinematic not only are the cutscenes, but even the action scenes when you're playing through it. You may miss it whilst playing it because you're focused on trying to stay alive, but if you watch someone play it, you can see there's so much going on in the background, whether buildings being exploded or other things, but it really does have so much detail put into it, even in places where you may not even see. Flynn and Chloe were good additions as well. Flynn providing that personal relationship to Nate whilst also being on the other side, as well as Chloe at some points. But this game really does have it all. I adore it so much, hence why it is in a #1 place. So that was my ranking of all 5 Uncharted games. For the second time, the ranking hasn't changed since my last one, but yeah, as I said, I just thought it would really benefit from updating this into a better made video, and not to mention adding my scores in more specific detail underneath. Before I finish here, I'll give my quick thoughts on the Uncharted movie which I just saw, and to be honest, I was surprised. I went into this really skeptical as someone who loves the franchise. Tom Holland doesn't really match the look of Nathan Drake, nor does Mark Wahlberg, and I get that it's meant to be an origin story of sorts, but I was really worried and I didn't feel like the trailers won me over either. But going into it, the only real problems I had were those appearances of Nate and Sully, and to be honest, Chloe as well. More of a case of her accent I thought was pretty bad. But besides their looks, I really did buy their chemistry, and their interactions really did provoke that of Nate and Sully in the games, with all their one-liners, their banter, their quips. On another note, I didn't expect an Oscar-worthy film or something new to bring to the genre, but as far as video game adaptations go, Uncharted is solid. The story is very, very familiar and really predictable. One of the best compliments I can give a video game adaptation is, if you haven't played the games, it will just fit in amongst any other original action movie. It is entertaining, the action scenes are exciting, but as a die-hard fan, I was disappointed with the casting, even though I really do like Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland. Those were my thoughts on this film and the games as well, so please let me know what your ranking of the games is down below, and also just let me know what you thought of the film. I'm really interested in other people's opinions in it. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you did enjoy, and don't forget to like and subscribe.